In the previous Mishnah, we were discussing handles, oven handles. And when an oven becomes tamei, how much of the handle becomes tamei with the oven? In our Mishnah, we're not talking about literal handles, we're talking about theoretical handles. Meaning a handle, halachically, means anything that adds to the functionality of the vessel and is connected to the vessel. We'll consider it a yad, a handle. And if the oven becomes tamei, all the yadais, all the handles, theoretical handles, anything that's connected to it that adds to the functionality will also become tamei. So that's this Mishnah. We're discussing what is a theoretical handle. The Mishnah starts off, Ateres kira, the crown of a kira. If you remember, a kira is an oven with two burners. Two burners. I don't know why in last Mishnah I drew it as a square. They were generally circular. So it has two burners for two pots. This is a cooking oven. And what people used to do in those days, some people would have a cover to the oven. They would add like a lid to the oven to insulate the two pots, to keep them hot. Now, since the pots were hot in and of themselves, they didn't really need this cover. And generally people therefore wouldn't use these crowns, the crown of the kira. Right? This is a kira oven. So since generally people didn't use it, we don't consider it as adding to the functionality. And therefore it's not a theoretical yad. And if the oven becomes tamei, the ateres kira, the crown, does not become tamei. And interestingly, the crown can't become tamei in and of itself, as a vessel of itself, because it's a cover to an oven. And we learned in Perek Beis that covers are not valid receptacles, because they're not made to hold things, they're made to cover. So it can't become tamei in and of itself, and it doesn't become tamei with the kira because we don't consider it being a yad, because it doesn't add to the functionality. Therefore, the ateres kira will always be tahor. So the Mishnah rules ateres kira, the crown of a kira, is tahira. Now that's case number one. We're going to have three cases. Case number two is tira sataner. What does tira mean? It's a hard word, but there's actually a pasuk in Chumash that says the word tira sataner. So let's learn some Chumash first. Eile heim b'nei Yisrael. These are the b'nei Yishmael. These are the children of Yishmael. The Eile shemaisem, and these are their names. B'chatzreihem, in their open cities, in their unwalled cities. Uv'tiroisam, and by their strongholds, by their fortresses. Uv'tiroisam. In our Mishnah, we're talking about fortresses. That's the same shirish. Tiras hataner, the fortress of an oven. So what's a fortress of an oven? We're talking about a taner, which is a baker's oven. So it got narrow at the top so that the heat gathers up, so it gets really extremely hot. And what they would build on the side of the taner, they would build a little basket. Here are the walls of the basket. So that when they finished baking the loaves of bread in the taner, they would have the loaves of bread on the walls. They would stick on the wall. And when they were finishing, when these lafas, pitas were finished, they would take the pita off the wall and they would store it in this little basket over here. So this is the tira sataner. This is the fortress of the oven. Like imagine a little theoretical person standing over here, and he's looking at this what looks like a tower here. The taner has the shape of a tower, and here's like the fortress of the tower. That's why they called it a fortress, but it was really just a basket to hold breads. So the question is, does this basket, when does it become tamei? How tall does it need to be functional? So the Mishnah rules, tira sataner, the fortress of an oven. Bizman shehi gevoya arba'a tvachim, when it's 4 tvachim tall, then it's functional. To metama, it can become tamei b'magu ba'avir, if tuma touches it or if tuma goes in its airspace. If it's less than 4 tvachim, tahira, it's tahar. Because since the minimal size of an oven, of a baker's oven, is 4 tvachim, so the breads that were baked in them were, generally speaking, around 4 tvachim tall. So to store these breads, to store these lafas, the basket to store them also needs to be 4 tvachim tall, to be functional. And therefore, this tir sataner can only become tamei if it's 4 tvachim tall. Now, the reason why the Mishnah says it can become tamei through touch and through the airspace, I mean, obviously, if it's susceptible to tumah and it's an earthenware vessel, it could obviously become tamei through the touch and through airspace. It should just say it's susceptible to tumah. Why does it spell out through touch and airspace? So the Mishnah just does that to contrast it with the seif of the Mishnah, as we're going to see. So the Mishnah, and now the Mishnah says like this: Im chibraloi, if you connect the fortress to the oven, meaning what they would do sometimes is they would connect this fortress through through cement. They would cement it on, and then they would place stones under it to keep it in midair. So the Mishnah says, Im chibraloi, if you connect it to the oven, afilu ashal shalvanim, even if it's on 3 stones, meaning you put stones under it, so it's a weak connection, because if you took out those stones, if those stones rolled out, then the tira, the fortress, would sort of crack off, because it's connected to it, but it's also being supported by these stones. And if you took off the stones, it would crack off, so it's a weak connection. Nevertheless, the Mishnah says if it's connected through it, even weakly, timeya. It's susceptible to tuma as a yad. Remember, this is a theoretical handle. Because it adds to the functionality of the oven. When you're finished baking, you have a place to store the breads so you could bake more. So since it adds to the functionality of the general baker's oven, so it becomes part of the oven. And if the oven becomes tameh, then the fortress automatically becomes tameh. And vice versa. If this fortress becomes tameh, then automatically the oven becomes tameh. They're considered one vessel. It's considered a handle to the vessel. Now the Mishnah discusses another item that's not considered a yad. And that is the pockets to a kira. Look at the kira over here. What they used to build on the kiras, they used to build these cement pockets that they cemented on. And these pockets were meant to hold oil or spices, and they would be called the Beis HaTvol, the house of spices, or it would hold a candle so you could see what you're spicing, called the Beis Haner, the house of the oil, the house of the candle. And the question is, are these pockets considered a yad to the oven? And therefore, if the oven becomes tameh, do the pockets automatically become tameh? And if the pockets become tameh, does that mean the kira automatically becomes tameh? Now we've seen with regards to the tiras hataner that since it helps the function of the oven, it helps you have a place to place the placement of the breads, so it helps the oven function, and it's considered a conceptual yad. And so we see if the connecting item has the oven's goal in mind. If it has the oven's goal, then it's considered a yad. However, this is a little bit of a subtle distinction here. In our case with the kira's pockets, it's not helping the kira cook the food. It's not helping the oven do the job of cooking. It's helping the person spice the food or make the food taste better. So it's really servicing the food. It's not servicing the oven. We could say that the oven and the pockets share the same goal. They service the same item, namely the food. So we could call that it has the same goal. It has the same goal. So it's a little bit more of a gray area because it's not helping the oven's function. It's not helping the oven's goal. And therefore maybe it's not considered a yad. It has the same goal as the oven to cook the food and to make the food taste good, but it's not servicing the kli itself. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we could have something on a vessel that has a completely different function, a different goal. Like if you remember in Perek Beis Mishna Zayin with regards to the Beis HaKaros, where you had the dip tray, the tray that held the different bowls, and in one bowl you'd have the onion dip, in one bowl you'd have the eggplant dip, and we said there that those bowls are judged independently, and if one bowl becomes tameh, that doesn't mean the other bowls become tameh, because over there each bowl doesn't help at all the function of the other bowl. They all act independently, and therefore they're all judged independently. So that's at the whole other end of the spectrum. So over there, coming back here to our chart over here, case number 1, where they have a different goal, connecting vessels that have different goals are judged independently. Going here to number 3, if the connecting vessel shares the same goal as the vessel it's connecting, it is considered a yad. Now what about number 2, where they're both items share the same goal? So that's what our Mishnah is talking about. And the Tanna Kamma of Meir in our Mishnah says, he rules that even though it's not a yad, but midrabanon, we put a decree that considers it part of the vessel. And that decree is called Kol HaMechuber Loi Hari Hu Kumoso. Any connecting vessel, Kol HaMechuber, any connecting vessel on a vessel, any connecting adjunct pocket of a vessel, has the same din as the vessel. And if the vessel becomes tameh, if the oven becomes tameh, then the pockets become tameh, because they're connected and they share a similar goal. However, once we put this decree on this oven, we want to make it clear that it's only midrabanon, and we don't want you to think that your food is mamish tamei midarai, so we don't want you to come to burn truma. And therefore, we make a little bit of an oddity in the decree, and we say that only if the oven became tamei through touch, meaning if the tuma touches the inside, only then do the adjunct pockets become tamei. But if tuma only doesn't touch anything and it just goes into the avir, it just goes into the airspace of the kira, then the pockets remain tahar, and that will remind you that this whole din is only midrabanan. So let's read it inside. Beis HaPach, the house of the oil, Ubeis HaTvolin, and the house of the spices, these pockets for spices, Ubeis HaNer, and the pocket for the candle, Shebakira, it's on the side of the kira. So if the oven became tamei through maga, it's mitamin b'maga. These pockets become tamei if the oven became tamei through maga. But as the oddity of the decree, they said if the oven became tamei through avir, then the pockets don't become tamei. As the Mishnah says, ve'enon mitamin ba'avir. They don't become tamei if the oven became tamei through avir. Divrei Rebbe Meir. These are the words of Rebbe Meir. Rebbe Yishmael, now the Bartanura changes this to Rebbe Shimon. Rebbe Shimon mitaher. Rebbe Shimon says no, that these pockets are judged completely independently, and if the oven becomes tamei, it doesn't matter how, the pockets are always tahor. And that's because he doesn't agree to this din d'Rabbanan. He doesn't hold of the din of kol hamechuber loy hariu kumoso over here in our Mishnah. And therefore he says that each vessel is judged independently. Now it's your turn to read the Mishnah.